Hello, I'm Shane M. Nygaard, and welcome to another video in my Age of Aquarius series, also titled New Mythologies, a series in which I reflect on thoughts and ideas about this new age, this age of Aquarius humanity is entering. This video is Utopian Dreams, Dystopian Nightmares, which is a look into this dichotomy of ideals through the lens of Aquarius-related images and symbols. As background, the foundation for this series is the great astrological ages. If you haven't heard of these, here's a brief overview. You're likely familiar with the 12 zodiac signs seen here: Aries, Gemini, Capricorn, etc., and how the sun transits through each sign over the course of about 30 days. When someone asks, "What's your sign?" this is what they're referring to. Aries covers mid-March through mid-April, then into Taurus for mid-April through mid-May, followed by Gemini, and so on. The sun transits counterclockwise through all 12 signs in 365 days. But we can also perceive these signs in the much broader, vaster scope of the great astrological ages, which reference not the sun's movement, but the movement of the vernal equinox point, which you can look up that one online yourself. It's here, it's the large gray dot. This point moves clockwise through each sign, but not over about 30 days, but rather over the course of around 2,000 years or so, as shown here. Each sign, its ruling planet or planets, and its symbol, i.e., the ram, two fish swimming in opposite directions, the scorpion, etc., become the underlying dynamics and overarching themes of the collective psyche, synchronistic with human activity and evolution. One full orbit through all 12 signs takes about 26,000 years, referred to as the Great Year. So currently, this vernal equinox point is right between Pisces and Aquarius, signifying we're near the end of the age of Pisces and the onset of the age of Aquarius. The overlap period is said to be some couple or a few hundred years or so. So in our current time, we experience both the old age winding down and the new age coming in. And one thing I'll always return to is psychologist Carl Jung's direction to stick with the image. This is especially on point for astrology, which is filled with imagery. This is my favorite Jung quote because there's just so much to it. Sticking with the image can be said to be sticking with the imagination, the imagination. I mean, it's how we look at and perceive things in every sense of the word. He also said, image is psyche. So we can see when we're imagining, sticking with the image, we're active in psyche's world. And with psyche as the Greek word for soul, we can understand when we're imagining, we're ensouled. And that's huge. So, as I've been reflecting on and thinking about the images for the age of Aquarius, the word awakening seems apt, as when the fifth dimension sang about the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Dawn is typically a time of waking up, awakening. I've also been thinking about how its ruling planets Uranus, the modern ruler, and Saturn, the traditional ruler, are likely to align with overarching themes for the next 2,000 years or so, and what its symbol, the water bearer, might mean, and how this all might show up in our world. So the themes of these two planets are recognized through familiar keywords. For Uranus, showing us qualities of liberty or liberation, high ideals, revolution, and innovation, to name a few. Saturn's world pertains to control, limits, time, and authority, and much more. Quite the contrast between these two, really. So while as planets, humans saw Saturn first, followed by newcomer Uranus, in ancient Greek myth, it's actually the other way around, as these mythic figures were father and son, Uranus, followed by Saturn. These two planets, in all their symbolism and mythic imagery, are key players in the Aquarian imagination. So let's first look at Uranus, the planet seen here in a gorgeous fantasy image. But to get to the mythic image, we need to step back in time and look to the Greek mythic family tree, where Uranus was born of Gaia, Earth, who, along with her four siblings, was born out of chaos. We can see these early progenitor gods and goddesses as the OG influencers, gods and goddesses of creation. And it's only fitting for Uranus, as we are in the creation period of a new age. When Uranus and Gaia, Earth and Sky, united, they first birthed the 12 gigantic, clumsy, ungraceful Titans. Among them, Saturn, aka Cronus, the god of time. So, for example, note here also Mnemosyne, aka memory. And we all know how giant, clumsy, and ungraceful memory can get. Following the birth of these 12 titans, Uranus and Gaia birthed the enormous Hecatoncheires, hundred-handed ones, three brothers, each with 100 hands for wielding clouds and 50 heads for blustering winds, followed by the gigantic Cyclopes, one-eyed giants, masters of thunder and lightning. Uranus, however, pushed the Hecatoncheires and Cyclopes back into Gaia. He did not like these enormous creatures. So we know Uranus's revolutions, which can also connect us to revolts. And it's through the eyes of Uranus that things can become revolting. Revolting defined as causing intense disgust. These creatures, birthed through the union of earth and sky, were, to Uranus, revolting monsters. This is important because through this act, we can start to see a certain level of Uranian intolerance. The Uranian imagination is intolerant of what he or it sees as revolting. So, as a mythic side note here, when we stick with the image of the Cyclopes, we see when Gaia and Uranus unite, we get our modern Cyclopes. Telescope, perhaps in olden days it might have been called telescopy, the camera, and our patron saint of online events, webcam. Our one-eyed techno wonders. This video is presented looking through the one eye of a mythic cyclops. I mean, this is how archetypes work, and I just love it. The form may change, but the underlying image remains. So there's a theme here with Uranus, seen when we look back over time when astrological Uranus passed through Earth signs. So that would be Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, symbolically uniting Earth and sky imagery, where we see the myth repeating. In 1936, when Uranus was in the Earth sign of Taurus, Jim Henson, creator of the Muppets, was born. And like Uranus and Gaia, he also birthed monsters into the world. Though, for the record, they did tend to be totally adorable. In the mid 60s, when Uranus was in the Earth sign of Virgo, we saw the birth of the Munsters, as well as the release of the smash hit single The Monster Mash, and the first appearance of the Cookie Monster. Back in 1933, when Uranus was in earthy Capricorn, we see explorations of genetic engineering, a very Uranian science, described as, quote, the making of monsters, and released in autumn of 2021 as Uranus transited Taurus is David Livingstone Smith's Making Monsters, the Uncanny Power of Dehumanization. So, time and again, this mythic image of Uranus's union with Gaia inevitably results in monsters. And though they can sometimes be friendly and adorable, these monsters are inevitably not human. Hence, the sense of Uranian dehumanization as both matter-of-factly not human, but also defined as depriving a person or group of positive human qualities. Along with Uranus's brand of intolerance, we start to get a glimpse here of how we enter the imagery and fantasy of dystopian worlds. More to come on that. But sticking with the mythology, as Uranus oppressed his revolting sons, stuffing them back into Gaia, Gaia in turn pleaded with her 12 Titan children to help her. Saturn, Kronos, eventually stepped up, and famous scythe in hand castrated his father, ending Uranus's rule and role as a progenitor creation god. But before we cut away from Uranus, ha 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 ha, and move on to Saturn, I want to share another important perspective of Uranus. Sticking with the myth of Uranus's creation, Carl Karenyi writes, Gaia, for her part, bore first of all, and as her equal, the starry sky, Uranos, so that he should completely cover her. I love this quote and this idea. So imagining Uranus as the starry sky, the cosmos, the universe. Within the realm of Uranus, we find an extraordinary precision. Within our own solar system, we see the planets, each with their own unique environment, unique distance from the sun, and unique orbital patterns, each moving with a consistency tracked across centuries. Of this precision, Roman scholar and skeptic Cicero said back in the first century, in the heavens, so within Uranus, Therefore, there is nothing fortuitous, unadvised, inconstant, or variable. All there, within Uranus, is order, truth, reason, and constancy. I mean, no wonder the Hecatoncheires and Cyclopes were so disturbing to Uranus. So this too, this truth, reason, constancy, and precision is the realm of Uranus. And I think this is where we can see an association between Uranus and technology, as technology mirrors this precision, this constancy, consistency, and clarity. We understand Uranus as revolutions in the sense of uprisings. But is Uranus as the starry sky then not also the planet of revolutions, planetary revolutions, always constant within the starry sky? This circular imagery and motion is everywhere within the starry sky. Planetary spheres and orbits, the starry sky encircling the Earth. I mean, these are all shapes within the Uranian imagination. And with the circle as a symbol of wholeness, we can start to see its influence in the Age of Aquarius concerning itself with wholeness, with the whole. Think, for example, globalism, an unheard of concept for much of the age of Pisces. So when something is whole, it's complete. We can even say it's perfect, a state of being complete. Makes me think of the ballroom events in the TV series Pose, 10, 10, tens across the board. Or the Olympics, a 10 is when the intricate moves and maneuvers are completed perfectly. And I've been fascinated by astrologer and Jungian analyst Liz Green's observation that whatever Uranus touches is granted its vision of perfection. It's an amazing quote. But what is Uranus's vision of perfection? We see this Uranian desire towards perfection in the field of genetic engineering, even referred to by Dr. Nathaniel Comfort as the science of human perfection, with all the potential of creating designer, perfect humans. We see it in the field of robotics, manufactured human activity perfected and dehumanized. And we see it in the drive toward more perfect driving via ever more perfect car designs. You might be starting to get a glimpse of where we begin to imagine utopian worlds, those ideal, perfect worlds. So, more to come on that shortly. So that was a short exploration of Uranus, the revolting, intolerant, dehumanizing, revolutionary, imperfect Uranus. Now let's also briefly visit Saturn, co-ruler of Aquarius, mythic son of Uranus, and god of time, seen here also in a gorgeous fantasy image. We are all likely pretty familiar with Saturn as walls, containers, restrictions, contractions, boundaries, and limits. But mythic Saturn, Kronos, after he overthrew Uranus, reigned during what's called the Golden Age, a time of exceptional productivity. How very Saturnian of him. But as time went on, the pattern of overthrow continued in the mythic family tree, and Saturn's son Zeus, Jupiter, overthrew him. Following this overthrow, Saturn was left to rule over the golden age of the past, a time gone by. Saturn rules history. This mythic golden age is remembered, i.e., nostalgia, as a time of peace, harmony, stability, and prosperity. The earth provided food in abundance, and it was a period in which people are said to have aged backward or lived to a very old age with a youthful appearance. It almost sounds idyllic, nearly perfect. Which brings us now to this idea of utopia. Water time. A utopia is an imagined community or society that possesses highly desirable or nearly perfect ding qualities for its citizens. It's an ideal state. This idea of a society of perfection or ideal is very Uranian. Combined with this golden era imagery of Saturn, we start to hear both Saturn and Uranus structuring this vision. Landscape images of utopia represent these immaculate, clean, crisp technological worlds with flying vehicles, the sky god's realm, glass windows galore, and often clear blue skies. The image is clean, distress-free, and dazzling. Whatever Uranus touches is granted its vision of perfection does seem right at home in utopian worlds, right? Again, clean, precise, and almost crystalline. That crystalline perfection appears in images of utopian structures, structures built as though heading toward the sky, reaching for the sky god Uranus, visions of perfection. We also see utopias appearing in literature, originating all the way back to Plato's Republic, but in abundance in the most recent centuries as science fiction became a new genre following the discovery of Uranus by no coincidence. Authors such as H.G. Wells, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and Marge Piercy. We see these authors, among many more, who across the centuries each imagined very different but very utopian worlds. Is it any surprise they all have prominent Uranian placements in their charts? Sorry, this slide is a little busy, but it highlights major Uranus aspects, and we can recognize when Uranus aspects personal planets, the Uranian imagination is animated. These are very complex stories, but let's take a very high-level look at a couple of them. We could say painting with a broad brush. H.G. Wells, with his Uranus, Mars, trine Saturn, which is a strong aspect here, and Aquarian moon and ascendant. Such strong placements signal an Aquarian vision. Let's look at what these placements animated for him and helped him write a modern utopia. A modern utopia is a story of time travelers in an alternate Earth reality where Earth is led by the world government, and this world government offers freedom for all, no poverty, no need to work, as technology has liberated Uranus, the people of this Saturnian burden. And utopia is maintained through growth of the human spirit. So we hear both Saturn's sort of ruling the golden age and Uranus ideals in this image of utopia. We can look at Charlotte Perkins Gilman with Uranus opposing Mars and trine Mercury. Saturn opposing Neptune and Mercury and trine Mars. Again, very strong Age of Aquarius aspects, animating her utopian novel, Herland. In her land, three men happen upon her land, a lost society populated exclusively by women. In her land, no war, no crime, no hunger, no waste, no vanity, no jealousy, no heartbreak. Almost sounds dehumanized. Motherhood has the highest regard, and the women reproduce asexually. Gender issues are non-existent. Technology booms, making life simpler. Education and art abound. In this, what could be called utopian perfection, all troubles of the world are resolved. Or Marge Piercy with Uranus, Mars Square Moon, and her story, Woman on the Edge of Time, where the edge becomes a tipping point from present to future, and for humanity, either utopia or the opposite. This is the story of a Mexican American woman, Connie, and her struggle within the mental health system. While within the system, which has completely dehumanized her into almost a test subject, she has a vision. A visitor from the future who takes her to the year 2137 and shows her two opposing futures developed out of the current time. One, a utopia, where issues of our day were resolved. The other, a toxic world with only the wealthy possibly surviving. In the utopia, a world with no pollution, no homelessness, no starvation, no poverty. A world with race and gender equality, where everyone has personal freedom and advanced technology is used for the good of all. In the opposite world, pollution abounds. Power hierarchies leave the wealthy in charge, and technology protects the powerful. So these are just three examples, but we see themes throughout utopian stories of time travel to the future, or commonly alternate realities, time imagined outside of Saturn Chronos logical time. We see equality and fairness for everyone, and an elimination of oppressive ways of life, an understanding of gender outside of and beyond traditional man and woman, technology to benefit all, and ultimately a look at what is best for the whole, for everyone. There is a certain appeal to this. But as Nathaniel Comfort points out in his book, The Science of Human Perfection, utopias always have a dark side. Even in imagined societies, there is always a cost, and it is usually liberty. Here, we almost hear the symbolism of Saturn wielding his scythe and castrating Uranus, power cutting off freedom. But it often goes further, as when we imagine utopia, we're not far from dystopia. A dystopia is a futuristic, imagined universe in which oppressive societal control and the illusion of a perfect society are maintained through corporate, bureaucratic, technological, moral, or totalitarian control. That's a lot of control. In dystopian landscapes, notice the utter lack of symmetry. the grounded helicopter, no taking to the skies here, and the dirt and disarray. Notice the dark skies, a distinct lack of the image of the sky god Uranus, or symbolic of the shadow of Uranus. And the decay destroys what might otherwise lend itself to perfection. Marsilio Ficino, scholar, priest, astrologer in the Italian Renaissance, when writing about Saturn, said, "Dark hues surround the image of Saturn." In alchemy, Saturn was identified with the process of putrefaction, that phase of the soul's work when the mess that has been made is allowed to settle, rot, and putrefy. That he says that in the book The Planets Within. And thus we see a Saturnian world, lacking sight of the sky, of Saturn's progenitor father Uranus. Thus, nothing being created, only passive decay. And as the god of time, we become stuck in a mortal timeline. And where there is mortality, there is decay and death. Entropy rather than eternity. And while utopian themes have appeared as far back as Plato in the Republic, dystopian themes did not really start to appear until the word showed up in 1868, around the time authors H.G. Wells and Mary Shelley published dystopian novels, The Time Machine and Frankenstein, respectively. And like the utopian authors and their strong Uranus placements, we start to see a pattern with dystopian authors. Authors such as H.G. Wells with The Time Machine and Yevgeny, I haven't pronounced this word for a while, Yevgeny Zamyatin with We. Margaret Atwood with The Handmaid's Tale, Suzanne Collins and The Hunger Games, and Elia Dawn Johnson with Love is the Drug. Whereas utopian authors shared very strong Uranus placements, these authors share very notable Aquarian signatures in their astrological birth charts, along with major Uranus and Saturn aspects, often Uranus and Saturn in aspect to each other. We can say the Aquarian imagination is animated. I did check out many top authors from other genres, like children's books, detective stories, westerns, and romance. And it's really hit and miss for Aquarian signatures. But each of these dystopian authors, on their own and at various times across almost 2 centuries, imagined worlds of corporate, bureaucratic, technological, moral, or totalitarian control. Call me fascinated. Again, these are very complex stories, but let's take a short look into a couple of them. Margaret Atwood, with her ninth house Aquarian moon Mars, squaring Uranus and squaring her sun. This is a powerful fixed T-square, animating the challenges around individual liberty versus the collective, a key theme in The Handmaid's Tale. In The Handmaid's Tale, an abrupt uprising brings the Republic of Gilead to life, a world in which men called commanders dominate and control, and women are property, renamed, relocated, removed from any ability to choose. The handmaids are the fertile women forced to have the commander's children. In Gilead, the colonies are fields of toxic waste where all unpeople are sent to work and clean up, where they die from the toxic waste. Sounds like Uranus pushing those deemed revolting back into Gaia. And unpeople are the outsiders, old, sick, homosexual, non white, criminals, all dehumanized. Desire for freedom connected the handmaids with each other, bringing a certain strength and solidarity amidst their limited, restricted lives, leading to whispers of a possible way out via a rumored underground liberation group known as the Underground Female Road. And next is Suzanne Collins with a noon chart because her birth time is not known, but the placements that remain include Saturn in Aquarius trine Venus, as well as Uranus conjunct Mercury. And she imagined the Hunger Games, a story set in Panem, a capital city surrounded by 12 districts. Ultimate authority in Panem falls to President Snow, a tyrant who worked his way up the hierarchy. Annually, the capital mandates a boy and a girl from each of the 12 districts enter the Hunger Games, a survival competition which only one from the 24 will come out alive. The game is played in an intricately designed world of natural and technological threats, a world designed by humans, invoking their most terrible impulses for how the competitors could die or be killed. Citizens in the capital watch and cheer as the games play out, dehumanized and desensitized to the fact that they cheer and applaud as the competitors are forced to kill each other. A dystopia within a dystopia. Katniss Everdeen, in volunteering as tribute, disrupts the status quo from the start and becomes determined to not only end the Hunger Games, but also President Snow's rule. She's the fire of the revolution, and as a rebel, Hunger Games designer told her, while you live, the revolution lives. And lastly, Philip K. Dick with his 11th house Venus and Moon in Aquarius, and also Uranus on his ascendant square Mars, who thought up The Man in the High Castle. The title alone invokes a patriarchal image and distance. In this story, we enter an imaginary world with a different ending to World War II, and the United States is instead the Greater Nazi Reich and the Japanese Pacific States, a world of imperialism and fascist rule. In the Greater Reich, we see John Smith. Though not in the original story, he does inhabit the same world with the same characters Philip K. Dick created. John Smith has worked his way up the hierarchy to the top, Reichsfuhrer, ruler of the realm, a realm based in anti-Semitism, racism, and intolerance for physical illness or disease. And John Smith maintains the Reich status quo, a man of stone, cold, we could say a monster. But when John Smith's son is diagnosed with a form of muscular dystrophy, under the Greater Reich authority, he must be euthanized. We see the stirrings of an inner revolution. Cracks form in his stone cold adherence to the Reich, and his world begins to fall apart. I'll leave it at that. So we saw a glimpse in these dystopian stories, but common throughout many in the genre, the themes of worlds created following apocalyptic destruction or dramatic uprisings, authority and control solely in the hands of men, the dehumanization of minorities, intolerance for anything imperfect, and the need to rebel against the status quo for the sake of liberty and freedom. So we see in these utopian and dystopian stories the interplay between Aquarius's modern-day co-rulers Uranus and Saturn. Utopias imagine the perfect idealistic worlds of liberty, equality, and what's good for the whole. Dystopias, on the other hand, bring out the shadow sides, intolerance, authority, control, and ultimately a dehumanization of our fellow humans, stirring the fires of revolution. The stories and landscapes reveal very particular images to us, beautiful, terrifying, dark, idyllic, haunting, about society, questioning if what is good for all is good for one. Can we create a better world for everyone? All in all, I would say this is one of the collective challenges as we move into the age of Aquarius. These are all major themes as our world is ever more connected, ever more technological, and ever more advanced. How do we imagine creating this age of Aquarius without going to the extremes of these utopian, dystopian worlds? Really, that's another talk altogether. But I do have some thoughts we can take with us as we move forward, which concerns the symbol of the sign of Aquarius, the water bearer. As the age of Pisces begins to ebb out to sea, we notice how the water bearer shows us someone carrying an urn, an individual urn, not a collective Piscean ocean. So individuality does seem vital. What's the deal with the water bearer? Well, I learned very unexpectedly about the water bearer in a new way as I was binge watching the TV series Chicago Med. In one of the scenes, nurse April Sexton, who manages the medical residence, confronts her brother Noah, one of the residents, who has not been attentive to his work and gave a patient the wrong meds. His behavior persisted over a number of episodes, and April has had enough. She tells him he needs to get his act together, and you can't keep having other people carry your water for you. I had never heard it said that way before, and it really caught my attention. As far as I'm concerned, this is a line to remember for the age of Aquarius. You can't keep having other people carry your water for you. And to carry water, water must be contained, restricted to the shape of its container. We hear Saturn here, the container. And perhaps we're the containers. If we're each carrying our own water, we can start to imagine how important it is for this new age for us to be able to know what is and what is not ours to carry. Relating to one another takes on a whole new dimension and a different understanding of power. Carrying other people's water? Meh, eh. Or expecting others to carry ours? Again, meh. That just never seems to end well. So we return again to Uranus, remembering how Gaia, for her part, bore first of all and as her equal the starry sky, Uranos, so that he should completely cover her. Uranus, the starry sky, and also the archetype of the genius. So the ingenious starry sky. With the mystical truth of as above, so below, we begin to understand an astrological birth chart as our own unique inner reflection of the Uranian starry sky, our own unique Uranian genius. This is the water we are meant to carry, the water that we alone bear, contained within a perfect circle. And as the planets orbit and transit within us all, and well, without us, outside of us, we interconnect with others from time to time. And as Saturn, Chronos, logical gears of time inevitably move us forward, we carry our individual waters, adding our uniqueness to the whole. And in this context, we might understand astrology, the circular, cyclical movements and meanings of the planets, again, within us and without us. In the words of Archangel Michael in the TV series Supernatural, as, quote, a plan that is playing itself out perfectly. And and we each individually are part of this plan. And as the plan plays out and we face the very challenging time of today's world and look ahead into this developing age of Aquarius, we can glean wisdom from Marge Piercy when she says, the point of creating futures is to get people to imagine what they want and don't want to happen down the road, and maybe do something about it. Thank you.